Ladies and gentlemen, it's another installation of Indie Comic Secrets. We're going to do something a little bit different, though. We're going to be doing a reaction to the fall of Milestone Comics. If you don't know what Milestone Comics is, that's good. You came to the right place. A person that's helping me out with this video right here is my man, the manga king, my friend, Young Wavy. Young Wavy, what up, brother?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Young
Uh,
Wavy, look what I got. Talk to the people. Look what I got, though.
yeah. Thank you for having me for a second, second episode on the show. So, you know, absolutely got the first issue. That's monthly Shonen Wavy right there. That's my own American manga magazine. Definitely
Yes,
go
sir.
pick that up. That's on Amazon.
Yes,
Monthly
sir.
Shonen Wavy, American manga magazine. Go pick that up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sir. Make sure to pick that up. Before we get into the video, what made you go the magazine route instead of just a regular old manga? What made you go the magazine route?
I think the magazine route is crucial to not only the manga industry, but also at one point the American comic industry, in terms of just having something for as a jumping on point, just
Yeah.
to get readers invested in. So the volumes are a little bit more expensive and they take longer to release, and they're on a good schedule, maybe 1-2 volumes you'll see a year. This magazine is monthly, so you can
Okay.
follow the story monthly, or if you want to wait about 6 months in between volumes, or even about 4 months on the fastest turnaround rate, then you can wait. But a lot of people don't want to wait, especially when it's at very, very crucial or very entertaining part of the story. A lot of people just want to get it as fast as they can. So serialization is very important, and that's what this magazine is meant to serve.
One thing that I learned from you and learned from others is that consistency is important. So
Yes.
hearing you say monthly, a lot of people not doing that on the indie game, man. So hey, congrats to you. Hey, your grind is inspiring. Now let's get to this reaction right here. Let's
Thank
check it
you.
out right here. Let me know when you want me to stop on certain parts.
Okay.
I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. There were no black superheroes. None of them looked like me.
As a young black kid, we would look at the representations that we had and sort of be ashamed.
The comic books today, they reflect the people who create them, people who are in charge. We're mostly white males.
At the time, I said, if I want a world where there's black superheroes, we're going to have to create some black superheroes.
Every black kid who's ever wanted to do comics has had that idea.
I told him, the only way we're going to see it is if we do it. Milestone Comics was heroes for everybody.
They were very, very innovative and ahead of their time.
It was definitely revolutionary.
The political act was forming the company and having 4 black guys in charge. We broke a lot of barriers, but there's a price to be paid for doing things differently. So you want the real story of Milestone? Okay, here we go.
That was excellent. That was an excellent intro.
Yes, sir.
I definitely agree with Dennis Cowan. In terms of, if you wanna see something in comics, you got to do it yourself. At some point, you can't sit around waiting for people to come along and do it for you. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Especially now, we definitely see a lot more black characters, especially now. But back then, that was 30 years ago, so it wasn't very prevalent. And especially black creators at the time, just because culturally, we were just very behind, when it comes to unorthodox career paths, right? Especially entertainment. So it's gotten a lot better. It's definitely got a lot better, but we still aren't at we're not at a point where culturally for black people that comic books are even any career path within either animation, um, comic books, novels is it's I wouldn't say it's not acceptable, but it's very hard for you to grow up with. Depending on, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but
Yeah.
a lot of the obstacles that I've kind of seen growing up, especially with myself, my own family, and a lot of other Black families, and that I've seen growing up and I've grown up with, there's a lot of obstacles in the way, especially when it comes to our own family,
Yeah.
our own support system, a lot of dysfunction, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of creativity um, isn't easy to stay creative. It's not
Yeah.
easy, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're limited in the resources, especially also the knowledge. It's not easy. So
Yeah.
it definitely does take a creative environment. It takes and that starts in with your family. So I
Yeah.
think that's crucial to us elevating, culturally, but on a grand scheme, but just something as small as comics and creativity. It's important that we encourage it on the ground level of just, hey, our personal environment, our family, start
Yeah.
encouraging this. Start it. Even if you see just doodles, just creativity, start encouraging it so that way someone like me can grow up with the start to visualizing and start to also see that there's a prominent future to this, right? So you
Yeah.
also got to
Yeah.
invest in them, right? So if you see them drawing and doodling, my family, my father took me to a comic book shop, right, when I was younger. That's not normal,
That's not normal.
that's not
Not,
normal in our
not,
community.
not in our culture, because when it
Yes.
comes to our culture, it's basketball, football, rapping,
Yep.
and I hate to say it, on the street side, thugging, selling drugs. You know what I mean? And if
And
you the guy that's doodling in the background, you might be looked upon as a weirdo. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Or a nerd, But now I notice now within the Black culture, it's getting a little bit more accepting of the artist, the comic book creator. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Just a little bit.
slowly but surely, we're starting to take our culture into our own hands. Even that's those, a lot of those are stereotypes that, you know, we've been fed, because a lot of that is not even Black culture. When it comes to
I
drugs
agree.
and all of that, that's not Black culture. I don't,
I agree.
I don't agree with that at all.
I agree. I agree.
Even the sports aspects and all of that, to a certain extent, yes, but we can definitely be more. We just have to slowly but surely, and we're starting to see it. 30 years later, after Milestone, 30 years later, we're starting to see more Black people take our culture into our own hands, and we're shining beacons of that.
Yeah. Right on. Let's continue.
Sat next. They took all of us kids in after my mom died. She died when I was 8. After my mom died, I met this kid, Derek Dingle.
He and I sat next to each other from 2nd through 5th grade.
Now
We
let me
were-
ask you a question.
Yes.
Derek Dingle, was he an artist or was he a writer? Or was he just a founder?
No, Derek Dinkle was just someone that helped them, I believe, on the business side in terms of
Okay,
finance.
he was like an angel investor along those lines, huh?
I believe he helped with the accounting aspects. He had a more
Gotcha.
business background.
Gotcha. Let's continue.
we were pretty much inseparable. I went to Dennis's home one day with a stack of comic books from my brother's collection.
I did not know what a comic book was until Derek showed me it. And I was just done. From that moment on, I just looked at them and I was just gone. After that, I probably went to school to look at comic books. Anything like to get the new comic books from Derek. I had thick bottle glasses. I had a pocket protector. I looked like Sam Jackson in Unbreakable. You know, with that hairstyle that went like that? I was that kid. I was picked on. Well, the comics were like helping me cope with all that. Or maybe sometimes you get picked on because you're reading comic books.
Comics was sort of that little underground thing that we all did back then.
Growing up, I read a lot of comic books. Most of the kids in my neighborhood
read comic books.
It doesn't grab everybody. You just know it's for you. I mean, you have to be born a comic book fan, I think.
You know what's funny that they showing Method Man?
Yep.
Shout out to Wu-Tang Clan, because when they came out the gate, they was calling themselves comic book characters. Like, for instance, Method Man was the Ghost Rider. Ghostface Killer was Tony Starks. When I first heard Tony Starks, I didn't hear that from the comic books. I heard that from his raps. You had what's the other guy in the group? Think I can't forget. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He always set the tone on all the tracks. But he started off the track calling himself the neighborhood Spider-Man, Inspector Dick. You
Yes.
know? So Wu-Tang kind of put the comic book culture into hip hop, you know?
Absolutely, and I think that's, even just growing up in, using comic books, I think that's actually also another excellent kind of way for a lot of especially from their generation, a lot of black people to escape, right, from whether it's the dysfunction in their own family household or just their neighborhood or wherever they grew up in. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big kind of factor in the comic books. It is a way you can learn, escape. You know, like I said, I learned how to read, so it was my escape at a very
Yeah.
young age.
Yeah. It was my escape as well. Let's continue.
Because once you see one, it's like, when you open one and the smell and the pages and everything, you have to be born a comic book fan, I think.
Black kids read comics in huge numbers. The presumption that Black people don't read comics comes from people who don't know Black people.
To be a kid growing up in that era, and reading the Fantastic Four and reading the Hulk and Spider-Man and Batman, Superman, whatever it was we were reading, and to not see yourself, like we were completely invisible.
There were representations of African Americans in mainstream comics, but they tended towards kind of the stereotypical or the racist. Probably the most infamous would be Ebony White with Will Eisner's The Spirit.
Big lips, big eyes. He was meant to be comic relief.
Whitewash in 1941, this big red lip pimp hat wearing guy who's, oh Lord help me, this kind of thing. He was always in trouble, and it was just a superfluous, unnecessary character.
As a young Black kid, we would look at these other characters and sort of be ashamed because that's all we would see of ourselves. That was the representations that we had. There was nothing to aspire to.
After a while, you're saying, why isn't the hero African American?
I remember the day when Derek bought me a copy of Fantastic Four number 52.
I'm gonna ask you a question, man.
Yes.
Is it important for Black characters to be in comic books? Because, for instance, okay,
Yes.
I got a comic book called Ninja Blast, and of course the main character is Black. But I also got another comic book coming out called Banished Star, and this character is white. Is it important for Black characters to be in these books? I've always wondered that in the back of my mind. Is it important, or is the story more important?
It's a very layered question. I think, is it important for Black characters to be in comic books? And for me and for obviously a lot of these people to even get into comic books, it wasn't important. All right, it's the characters themselves. Now, I think Black itself is complementary to a character. I don't think Black makes a character, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's complementary to a character. Obviously, you could tell different stories from different backgrounds within that, but I don't think that's what makes a character, is the fact that they're Black.
Gotcha.
No, what makes a character is their actions. So whether or not they're Black or not, it's their actions that make a character, and that's what speaks volumes through. That's one of the reasons why when you have a Spawn or you have a Batman or you have a Spider-Man, they have a mask on, so you don't even know who they are You
And
know,
see,
that's
a lot of people forget that
yeah,
Spawn is a black character,
yes,
but the stories are so epic. You're not even thinking about him being black. You
yes.
know?
So the story is not him. It's not the fact that he is black. That's just complementary to the actual character himself, because
Yeah,
he's a human. You know that in being human is more than just your skin tone, right?
exactly.
It's layered. So is it important to see more black characters? To if you highlight it like that, where there are, it's important to, I would say it's more important to showcase a better representation of black characters than what they just highlighted. But I don't think that's what makes character, is what's on the outside, but their actual actions and what they do is what's most important. Because I didn't grow up seeing, not I didn't really grow up gravitating to a lot of black characters, but I wasn't really looking, right? I was just looking at
Exactly.
character.
Because think about it, most comic book heads, most black comic book heads, most of our favorite characters are not black.
Yes.
You know, so when I hear these guys speaking on, I don't see characters looking like me. I think they're going at it wrong. I think
Absolutely.
you need to think about the story first and then implement a black character if you want to implement a black character. But this, like you said, the skin tone should not be the main focus.
Yes, and we grew up in a time where there's this multitude of black characters. There's tons of black independent creators, and there's tons of black characters out there. But
Yeah, because when you think about most of the Image founders,
yes,
most of the characters they made in the beginning was black led characters, like your
especially
Spawn,
Shadowhawk.
your Shadowhawk.
Yes,
I know I'm
you got
missing a
Young
few.
Blood. You got characters in Young Blood. I believe
Young
so.
Blood,
Yes,
yeah,
Young Blood.
Young Blood. You got because he showed up in Spawn as well. He the one that killed Spawn, and that's how he turned into Spawn. Chapel. You got
Uh,
Chapel.
Interesting.
Rob Liefeld had all those characters. So yeah, and like I said, we wasn't even thinking about that.
Yes.
We was looking at the dope art, the dope story. You know?
Absolutely. So I think character matters most, whether they're black or not. That's complimentary. I think even like for me, my characters that I create, I don't, I naturally, they're just. I don't really think about whether or not I should create this character. Does this character have to be black? No, I just create the character based on their actions and what I
Yeah,
think that they represent. And black just comes through. It just comes through on the page. So that's where I'm most comfortable. In terms of my
yeah,
character designs. And I also feel like that they're going back to their point and them showcasing a lot of I guess the badly represented black characters. That's what kind of makes you think about it. Is when you see stereotypes or bad stereotypes, or you see characters that are poorly represented and they kind of fit a particular stereotype, it does reflect on the populace and it definitely the masses in terms of stereotypes. So you definitely do have to have some things that counteract that. So that's where you get good characters like a Static Shock. You get
yeah,
great characters, like characters that I create, that are deeper than just their skin tone. That's my way of counteracting the fact that you know that black oversees the actual character, because the character,
yeah,
what makes a character again is their actions. And you can have terrible character and they can be black, and you still got a terrible character. So
yeah. You're exactly right. Let's continue.
And I remember us reading it under the desk. We were supposed to be, doing our lessons. And that was the first time I had seen the Black Panther.
That was something. That was a special moment.
When the Black Panther showed up, just all in black, still one of the coolest outfits in the history of comic books. He's not a sidekick. He's not a mugger.
His introduction was him taking on the Fantastic Four to see if he could beat them. And he did. And as a kid, that blew my mind.
They've beaten Dr. Doom. They've beaten Galactus, who eats planets. But
right there,
the Black Panther defeats them all.
it
What was
wasn't the
that?
fact. It wasn't the fact that he was black, but look at his actions and what he's doing. That's what they gravitated to.
Yeah,
All right, now that's complimentary to the character. It's the fact that he's black and his origins and where he comes from. That's just complimentary.
Yeah, yeah. Let's continue.
So you go, this cat is badass.
The Black Panther is a really important character. Now, of course, all of his earliest adventures were written by, white writers and drawn by white artists.
Well, I never thought that it was my place to talk about politics, but I also felt there were some things that perhaps ought to be mentioned. And one of the things
You want to know something that's funny though, real quick, real fast? Okay, you know the Black Panther Party, right? I always thought the Black Panther Party came out first before the comic book, but the comic book actually came out first before the group. Did you know that?
I always thought it was a way to kind of think about kind of reflect on the time. So I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, I found that out recently. I thought Stan Lee, Jack Kirby took inspiration from the group, but nah, the comic book was out before that. So maybe the Black Panthers took inspiration from the comic. Who knows?
Interesting. But just real quick, he highlights the fact that it was created by white authors.
Yeah.
And drawn by white creators, which I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't even know why he highlighted it, but we'll see. I don't subscribe to the notion that only black people they're able to create black characters. I don't think that at all. Because if the roles were reversed, I don't think that's anybody can create any type of character. You just need to know.
I agree. And I'm glad you said that, because I as I look in the indie world, and when I look at black artists and black creators, they feel like they have this notion where they have to just make black characters. I've never felt that way. If I want to make an Asian character, a black character, that's what I'm gonna do. It's not my focus, because if you look at these Marvel movies and these DC movies and these Star Wars movies, when they start telling you the first black-led movie, I know it's not going to be a good show. It's not going to be a good movie, because that's your main focus. Your focus is the skin tone. It's not the story.
And not the actual character itself, because him being black does not make the character. Again, it's their actions and their upbringing and their choices and what they make. That's what makes a character, right? All of this is complementary. We don't have a choice in this, right? This is just complementary to what makes us, right? So, that's it. I agree with that. I also don't, I don't subscribe to the notion of just because your character is black, you're not telling me much. You need to actually tell me who this character is.
Yeah.
Right. Because even with my characters, my own book, my characters are characters. Them being my main character, Dominic, being black is honestly not even a factor, because he's an artificial human, right? So that's just, that's I kind of he's not even really human. So
I like that.
That's me kind of showcasing that you don't even. That's complimentary to the character and who they are, but them being black is not who they actually are. It's not all they are.
Right on.
always been against is bigotry.
I like the pilot very much. Yeah, she's a black girl. That's good.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby named their black superhero the Black Panther in the middle of the civil rights movement. Think about that. Stan Lee and two Jewish people.
And I thought, I will make him the king of a black nation in Africa.
He had his own country, and his country was the most technologically advanced country on the planet.
The mythology is that he sort of understood that Americans were a little too racist to accept like a black superhero from America.
The Black Panther can be powerful over there in Wakanda. And so he is not as inherently threatening as someone that you might see around the corner.
The first African-American hero I saw was Luke Cage. I would go to my local comic book store. They had their comic books on a spinner rack. And I remember this one standing out. It was just a single figure of a black man bursting out of chains. and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Brought it to school, and I showed it to Derek. He was blown away. It was one of the few times I got to show him something, as opposed to him always showing me.
In the beginning, I embraced it and I bought all of the issues, but I was finding it hard to read it. Some of the characters struck me as being stereotypical and sort of making fun.
I mean, I loved Luke Cage, and my cousins and I would sit down and we would read Luke Cage, and we would laugh, and we would go, nobody talks like this.
I don't think that Luke Cage should be saying "Sweet Christmas" all the time.
Sweet Christmas, really?
I think
I knew there was a white guy sitting back.
Huh? Say what?
I don't, I know these guys weren't thinking like that when they first read it. I know for a
Yeah.
fact. And
Yeah.
one is comics, one is comic book characters. Two, there are lots of animated characters like that in real life, everyday life.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah. Yes.
that's nothing. But the fact that he's kind of, again, they're kind of clarifying that these were white people that created it. It doesn't necessarily mean just because you're black that you can create another black character. Because again, it's not, the skin color doesn't make the character.
Yeah.
So
Right
I
on.
don't know. I don't know that notion. It's just subtle little things like this is just kind of, we'll
I
kind of get
see.
into it. We'll see more.
I see what you mean though. Like while they reading, they not thinking that like, oh no, this is kind of offensive. They if they are reading it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if they are reading it, they just enjoying it, I
Because
think they might be.
those are very small parts of this, even Luke Cage's character in the story. Those are
I
like
agree.
quirky character kind of tropes, I guess you could say, but
Yeah,
it's nothing offensive.
yeah, I agree. Let's continue.
Writing and panning this going, what does the dude from Harlem sound like?
Black people have never been in control of their own story in this country. People should tell their own stories.
One thing that comic books always communicated to me is two things: heroes and possibilities. And if you don't see yourself as part of that, then, who are the heroes? And what are my possibilities?
When Derek and I first started hanging out, it was all about reading comic books. Eventually, it became about us making our own comic books.
I don't even think we thought to copy them or mimeograph them or anything. We just sold the original art, like stapled together, like, you can get your own comic. The first characters we created was a character called Black Vig, and Jive was his partner. And I remember thinking, these are the coolest characters ever. And one day they're going to be famous.
Now,
I think at one point Dennis did say,
Yes, sir.
I do want to point out that there's definitely a generational difference in mindset for sure. So I'm not gonna act like I know exactly how it was, back then 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, however old these guys are totally, generations behind me in terms of how old they are. So I'm not gonna act like I know exactly how they felt when they're reading or coming up reading comic books. But now, kind of looking at it, and in times we're in right now, even when we do have all of the tools at our disposal to tell our own stories, there's
Yeah.
still a lot of black people not doing that. Still a lot of black people that are just complacent, and still in a lot of you see a lot of the dysfunction in the community, in a lot of the hot spots in the community. So it's there's I see what you're saying, but even now, when we have all the tools, a lot of us are still not doing that, right? Or
I
doing
agree.
nothing with it.
Yeah.
So I don't
I
think
disagree.
I think it still comes down to us. I'm not going to blame it on anyone else in terms of holding us back, because I think it's more of or culturally, it's just us that we need to come together, unify, like what we're doing here,
I
and
agree,
see
man.
more of that.
I think that's the main problem. The creativity, the talented is there, but it's the unification that's the problem. It's the unification, Let's continue.
Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this when we are older?
That was the dream, to somehow, someday, make our own comic books.
We graduated, graduation day from PS37. My family, the day after, moved to Norfolk.
Because he was my best friend, it was unreal for me. It was unreal. I didn't think I would see him again.
Wow.
Getting on that Greyhound bus and knowing that it's a possibility I never would be connected with my best friend again.
I didn't know these guys was all the way back like that, you know?
Yeah, that was Milestone right
When
there.
I got into comics, there were very few artists who looked like me. So I didn't have a whole lot of examples to look up to.
Comic book industry in the early 1970s wasn't diverse at all. It was
Now, Paul Levitz, that's the man that started a big controversy. And I'm pretty sure, I've never seen this before. I saw the other Milestone documentary, but this man right here was infamous because of Static Shock. The cover was made with Static Shock, and he was, making out with his girlfriend on the couch. And he was holding up a condom. And Paul Levitz said, no, we cannot do that on the cover.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you had stuff like Catwoman where she was pretty much in the nude, just a little piece of clothing covering herself up. And I think that was kind of like the downfall of Milestone when Paul Levitz was in charge. Did you recognize that? Did you see that?
Yes, but I thought it was them over exaggerating. I don't think Paul Levitz was making a complete bad decision by doing that, because these are younger characters, right? So as a publisher, when you're dealing with younger characters, you have to be a lot more strict, right? And things like Catwoman, that gears to a more of a older audience, right? So
Gotcha.
I think Milestone, especially when they started, especially with Static Shock, and it might have been, it was a Static Shock, right? Or was it a Rocket? Icon of
It was
Rocket.
it was Static Shock.
Okay, so that definitely that was more so for the younger generation. I think that was a good call. I think they should have just stuck towards the heroic side of Static Shock, and not so much of the like teen sex aspect. I think that was a bit much, especially for the cover. If
You think they was going too far? Because I know their message was probably safe sex with the teens, but you make a great point. You make a great point. That's a little bit too much for the younger audience as well.
and I don't think it was much of a hard correction. I think that's an easy fix, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it shouldn't be much said after that. I think a lot of the critiques that were made were very minor. Minor changes, wasn't really much. They kind of
Because
gave them.
that pissed off your boy Maduffy.
Yes, and they're gonna say, and that's also part of the reason why Milestone broke up, because even Dennis Cowan did not agree with Maduffy at the time, and we're gonna get into that. But he was trying to make a point. I think he was trying to be a little too controlling, and not think of the larger vision, the larger message, and the larger goal, right?
Yeah.
So something as small as that shouldn't have messed up the entire publishing deal, and it shouldn't have gotten that far.
I agree.
a bunch of Jewish and Italian guys.
I'd say that DC was probably at that point entirely white and male, except for, two women, and then I upped the demographics by being the third.
At the time, there were only a few black artists and no writers. I remember one black guy, I can't remember his name, who was in the production area. And beyond that, there was me.
Arvell was like the living example.
And I think
of
that's
a
more
black
of a-
person who made his living.
I think part of that is more of the just reflection of our own culture and where we were at the time, where you would get even shamed as a young kid reading comics if you're black.
You're exactly right. I'm gonna tell you why you're exactly right, because I lived it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm from the hood.
Yeah.
And whenever my buddies would come over my house, I had to put my comics up and put them in a closet because
Yeah.
I know exactly what they would have did if they would have saw me with them comments. They would have said, "Ah, you're a nerd. You're a nerd."
Exactly. And
You know,
some small shaming like this can just kill creativity altogether for any
right?
aspiring artist at the very beginning ages. So that's more of a reflection of why we did not have a lot of black creators creating, and that's also I don't think that's a DC being all white or the publishing industry being all white. That was more so a reflection of how those kids grew up versus how we grew up,
Yeah.
right? And it's a big major difference.
And that's what I'm noticing with this documentary, and I'm glad you're here to break this down, man. Then they trying to paint a narrative that's different from reality. You
Yes.
know what I mean?
I don't think it was them being racist and you had this kind of big bottleneck, guy blocking all black creators from getting into publishing. No, I don't think that was the case at all. Right.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the '90s boom and look at those old videos, who did you mostly see waiting in line for them comics? You might have seen 2 or 3 brothers in that line at the most. You
Yes.
know?
Yes. And one more point just to add real quickly is the fact that comics and art in general, animation, video games, is all about skill. So whether you're black, white, it doesn't really matter what race you are.
I agree.
If your skill shines and it speaks for itself, they will see dollar signs and try to sell your work.
I
Right.
agree. I agree.
Especially back then.
Drawing comics.
One day, this 14-year-old kid came over to our apartment, knocked on the door, and opened it and was, "Hey, you're Harvell Jones. Hey, it's really great to meet you." And he just kind of barged his way in, threw down some of his artwork, and told me, "Hey, man, I'll do whatever I can do." Well, that kid was Dennis Cowan.
He was an eager kid, and I thought that took a lot of guts to stick his neck out to get what he wanted. So he was always at the apartment helping Arvell.
I wasn't drawing anything. I was making coffee, running errands, sweeping the floor.
I was a terrible assistant. I think the only thing I really wanted to do was draw.
3 years later, I was like 17. I had a chance to bring my portfolio into the art director at DC at the time. He looks at my portfolio. My heart's beating. I remember that now. This is good. He handed it back, looked and he said, "These are good, but we already have a colored artist working for us." At the time, I said, strangely, it was like, "Oh, okay. So you're not hiring any more black artists." That's the only thing I thought. I didn't realize how up it was until later. After that, Jim Shooter at Marvel.
Okay, now we can say, okay, now there's an actual.
I just want to give a big shout out the Jim Shooter, the king. I call him
Yes.
the king. This man here, for people that's watching and don't know, I truly believe if this man was given his just due and they would have gave him the reins, he would totally change comics.
Yep.
This man single-handedly saved comics. And just the way that they did him,
Yep.
they did him so dirty, man. They
And
did
this
him
is
dirty.
someone that came in the game at 12 years old. This is
12 years old.
12 years old writing, and working at what DC, right? It was his
DC,
first gig. Yeah. So that Jim Shooter in general, I think he would have shifted a lot and made a lot of change in the industry because he was a real visionary, especially when you look into his work and also his own interviews.
I'm a student of Shooter. This man was brilliant, man. He was brilliant. He was born for that, and they just too many sensitive people because he was one of those hardcore bosses, Hey, you not late. If you late, you fired. It wasn't no in between. But what was you about to say before that? I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to shout out Shooter real quick.
With Dennis Cowan, that was he definitely ran into a lot of some discrimination. Definitely a lot in the early days. I've watched plenty of his stories, so I know he definitely did, and he ran into them. He's told these stories on many occasions, but I don't think going back, that was entirely the full reflection of the entire industry. I think in terms of black creators, being in the industry in general, or even growing up and pursuing this as a full-time occupation, right? In terms of comics, it's a very unorthodox career path, very difficult to you know, grow up and aspire to, and actually get into, have the actual knowledge to do it. So his experience, I would just say that does not reflect the times and the entire, you know, market, especially in the indie market at the time as well,
Yeah.
which was big.
Hired me to draw Luke Cage.
So Cage is trapped by the Hell One army. Right.
And he hired me to do it because he thought that I might be familiar with the subject matter. You're black, so we're gonna give you this black to do it. So I got a chance to do Luke Cage, which I had read when I was a little kid. After that, I had another opportunity to draw.
What you say?
Well, I don't think it was like that. Like, you're black, here's some black shit to do. I don't think it was like that. Because he did later on do Batman. He later on did other work. So I don't think it was, you know, I don't even think he took it like that, obviously, back then. You know, I think he was ready to just get some work, any work, and boom, you got it. But
That's it.
yeah, so
He was hungry, man. I think, like I said in this documentary, we just gonna keep it real.
But
I think they might be tweaking the narrative a little bit.
and I think
you
I
know?
also think that was genuine. Like, that was genuine, you know, from Jim Shooter, in terms of, hey, you might be able to relate to the subject matter. Let's see what you got. You know,
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
I'm telling you, man, Jim Shooter, man. I wished I would have met the dude, man. I was planning when I started this series. Jim Shooter was my number one dude I was gonna ask to interview. When I asked him a week later, he passed away, man.
So RIP
And
to him. I was just about to ask. So I watched some recent. I thought he was still kicking, but yeah, RIP to Jim Shooter.
yeah, he gone, man. And just the audacity of Marvel, you know, talking about, you know, he was great and all this stuff. This man should have had all his expenses, hospital wise and medical wise, paid for, man. I mean, he made Marvel so much money, and the only reason why he wasn't at Marvel anymore, because they didn't want him there no more. It ain't like he was losing Marvel money. No, he was bringing in money and saving them, and they just did him dirty, man. I tell you, man, if Jim Shooter got books, I'm buying them. I'm a student of that man. That man was a pure comic book genius. Just pure genius.
Black Panther. Nah, it was a big deal for me. This is at the start of my political awareness a bit. That story was about the Black Panther fighting apartheid, and his South African neighbors.
I gotta pick up some of his books. This artist,
what was he doing about it being the king of Wakanda?
Around that time, I started to get recognized throughout the industry. It was a bit surreal. I even ended up in an ad for Dewar's Scotch. While I was at Marvel, I met another Black artist, Michael Davis.
I heard about Michael from a mutual friend of ours. Her name was Darlene.
Darlene said to me, Michael, you got to meet Dennis Cowan, because he's like only one of 3 or 4 black people working in the industry.
I don't understand how it happened, but we ended up being very good friends.
From that point, he became my boy, and quite literally introduced me to the industry.
It was 1983. I came back to New York. I got a job at Black Enterprise as an associate editor. One day in 1989, I was on my way to work. I see this 50th anniversary Batman comic book. And then I go to the artist. It's Dennis Cowan. Very.
That's crazy how these guys was moved apart from each other. He in this business financial realm, and he just looking at the comic books and magazines, and he happened to see his old friend. Now, talk about freaking destiny.
Well, that's how large the market was as well. And I got I got the first Milestone book right here. Matter of fact, you know, so I do study the game. I do study
yes, sir.
You know, where it comes from. So
yes, sir. I got some right behind me. I got some Blood Syndicate.
Absolutely.
Plus, yeah,
But
I
yeah, I
thought that
mean,
was such a dope concept.
this was the prime peak of Dennis Cowan right here. To me,
Okay.
you know, just excellent work. This is an excellent issue. Absolutely.
That's it.
Next day, I called DC Comics. I have to find Dennis Cowan. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go to Dennis's house. And I rang the doorbell.
And I went to answer the door, and there's Derek in a suit.
I guess I probably looked like, an IRS agent.
That's one of those movie moments too. You open the door and your best friend, who you haven't seen in 10 years or whatever, is just standing there going, "Hey, what's up?" New York City was insane. The things that were going on were crazy. Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights.
We will not continue to pay for people that abuse and murder and maim us.
I mean, the 80s shaped what we did.
Wu-Tang.
It's funny that my start would be with a group of guys, and we sort of like a hip-hop X-Men, I guess. For a lot of people, the escape was music, whatever. My escape was comic books.
Hip-hop was emerging in a very political way. Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest.
Def Jam was rising. Spike was creating, his production company.
She's Gotta Have It, Do the Right Thing, to Malcolm X. Spike Lee, for us, was a major influence because Spike Lee did it himself.
In the comic book medium, there was an absence of this voice.
99.9% of comic book companies up to that point had been owned and run by white males. My own inclination was to create comics that were more contemporary. Even though it was a fantasy world, we wanted it to look.
What is your thoughts on McDuffie?
I think, for the most part, I don't think. I think he was a big part of why Milestone kind of got launched. Definitely, in terms of his him contributing to it, but he also contributed heavily to the downfall. And RP
I
to
agree.
McDuffie, but
And just the crazy thing about it too, believe it or not, after his death, he's still the reason why Milestone's still not blowing up. Because his wife is holding back a lot of the rights, like as far as them wanting to do Static Shock in certain shows or Static Shock in live action. She's the reason why a lot of that stuff is not popping.
yes, which is, it's layers to that as well, because a lot of the creation, even though he was a big part of the stories, but I think Dennis Cowan was the one doing everything, because he did an entire art book of all of the Milestone, creating the whole creation of the universe before it even launched.
Yeah.
Right. He was the one spearheading it all. So I think he should have been, enough to bring a Static Shock back. He should have been enough. But I also think that's, you say that there's a lot of, white-owned companies, but then you also go to this white-owned company, and I believe they got launched. So this was the official date of Milestone. Let me see exactly, just so I know before I say what I'm about to say.
Okay.
And
You made me want to pull out my
the official date, 1993. So 1993, yes, all the trademarks and everything kind of. So 1993, so they were probably in production, from 1990, 1991, 1992. They were kind of working on the issues. But Image also launched in 1992, and there was rumblings of independent companies. And this is also something that Dennis Cowan spoke about in his interview with Word Balloon, right? The fact that there was rumblings of doing it on their own. So they could have, if they could have easily been a part of Image, if they would have just ditched DC, or maybe just waited, right, just a little bit more, just waited just a little bit more, because 1993 and onwards, Image Central was together, and they could have rode that wave and become even larger than what they are now. But at some point, they should have, especially when they got their publishing deal was over with, they should have went, to Image instead of going back to DC,
That's interesting that you say that though.
because they own their
Because
rights. They, at that time, especially,
uh-huh.
it wasn't no DC had a foot in their rights. DC published their work, had the rights to publish it, but Milestones was owned and was their own imprint.
Yeah.
Right? They owned everything themselves. That was part of their original
Okay.
publishing deal.
So what was DC like they were just a publisher, right?
Yes, they only had the publication rights for when they were publishing. After that, they could have went, but I think the main reason why they stayed and tried to keep going with DC is because they wanted to be a part of that DC universe or some sort of superhero
Yeah,
universe.
because maybe they were thinking Marvel and DC, it don't get no bigger than this.
No, which I don't think. I think they could have built their own. I think even now, right? Even now, Milestone 2.0, instead of hanging on to DC, they could have just either started a Kickstarter to fund the relaunch themselves. In modern times, they could have easily made enough funds to fund their own publishing operations, with crowdfunding, and implemented that with Image, because Image would have, they have the history. They could have easily went to a publisher like Image to really get their work out there and really maximize Milestone and build it even further. Um, but
So let me cut you off real quick. So let's just say Young Wavy Comics.
yes,
So you will prefer Young Wavy Comics to be published by DC, like it be an imprint of Image instead of DC?
absolutely, absolutely, because one, you're in the shadow of DC, just like Wildstorm is, right? You see what
Yeah.
Jim Lee and Wildstorm is, and you
Oh
see
yeah, they bury Wildcats, man.
they will not prioritize anything other than DC and their
That makes
property
sense.
brands, right? So
That makes
you
sense.
cannot grow in a company like that. You cannot go far.
Yeah.
That's a licensing company, like we spoke about in our last interview. That's a licensing company. These are the grand licensing companies. They only care about those licenses that make up the actual business of DC and Marvel. They don't give a damn about any original work. They never will. They never have. Right.
Yeah.
So why would you clinch and hang on to? That's also the downfall of Milestone 2.0 as well. Is them doing that again.
Did it
Right.
again.
So
Yeah, they did. They did it again.
Like the world we lived in.
He was a brilliant person, not just a brilliant writer, but a brilliant person.
Dwayne McDuffie was probably the only black writer that I had met. I met him because they'd asked me to do Deathlock at Marvel, and he happened to be the writer. I responded to his writing immediately.
My biggest issue generally in writing mainstream comics is if you write a black character, he represents blackness. And that's ridiculous. That's way too much, way too complex, way too much weight for any character, any
Exactly.
single character to hold.
He right.
I like.
both got
See,
to the
this is
point
what
where
we were
we
saying
were
earlier.
Yeah.
That mindset
frustrated
itself.
at
Yeah.
That mindset is that mindset itself is it 100% in terms of what he just said there. That should not be your character. Your character should be the actions of the character, and especially in terms of representing, blackness. Like you said, that's just it's way too much of way too much, for
Yeah,
one
because
character to hold.
I think about the dude that created the Underworld movies. You know the Underworld movies with the vampires fighting the werewolves. You ever heard of that?
I have seen it, but
Okay.
that's it's
Well,
fuzzy in my mind.
anyways, that's a real big franchise. A black dude created it. It's no black people in that,
Yes,
and that's how it should be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
we definitely have to move past that mindset. I think it's the generational thing, obviously my generation, and we're definitely going to be moving past it, but we have to also elevate the actual, what it actually means in terms of Black culture, and kind of what it actually is. It's not what it is represented as, especially the fact that you being Black kind of defines you. That's not true.
Yeah. We got 5 minutes left. Let's watch a little bit more, and then we're going to end it. We'll have to do a part 2 maybe next time.
Hell yeah.
The lack of characters to express the things that we wanted to express. But that all changed in 1992. I literally woke up one morning. I thought, this is it. If I want a world where there's Black superheroes, we're going to have to create some Black superheroes. I got up and I called Michael Davis.
The idea was to create a universe of characters that look like us.
What do you think? Am I crazy? And he said, you're crazy.
Every Black kid who's ever wanted to do comics has had that idea.
I told him, the only way we're going to see it is if we do it.
It was that time.
So the next person was Dwayne McDuffie. And Dwayne looked at...
What you say?
Well, let's keep it rolling, but it absolutely was that time,
Yeah.
Both of us and said, you guys are crazy. And I'm like, nah, Dwayne, we could do it because whatever reasons I came up with, I don't remember. And Dwayne said, you're crazy, but I'm going to do it with you because you're crazy. But we'll do it, but you're crazy.
Dennis was committed from day one to get Derek involved. You know why? Because him and Derek made up comic books when they were kids. How cool is that?
Dwayne and Michael and I knew nothing about business, but we knew Derek wore a tie.
I always wore a suit, even on Saturdays.
Here's the idea. I pitched him the same thing. He said, you're crazy.
My response, of course, was, Dennis, I have a job. And he said, Derek, we have to do this. People have marched and died so that we can create these images. From that point on, the reservations, faded away.
That's right.
We met constantly. I drew a lot of pictures. I probably designed now the whole universe.
I got a phone call from Dennis Cowan and always wanted to do something like this.
Christopher Priest wrote some Bible stuff. Michael wrote some Bible stuff.
I created most of the background stuff. And then I ran it all past Dwayne McDuffie.
Just real quick, I love when people playing their universe like that. The Bible and all that stuff. I love it, man. I love it.
Absolutely.
Who made it better?
Dwayne McDuffie distilled all of it, rewrote it, and made it fit into this 28-page document. On a Friday evening, I bought that document over to DC Comics right before Paul Evans had to go home and gave it to him in his hands.
Dennis Cowan walked into my office. We were friendly, and he had a nice thick Bible.
He couldn't put it down. Every time he put it down, he'd pick it back up.
So Monday morning, he calls me on my phone and says, Dennis, this is great. We want to do it. Come down and meet with us.
It was euphoric. It was exciting. We did pop the cork and the champagne, but what was cooler than that was when we went.
When I see them in them suits, when I see them in those suits, it made me think about what you told me when I first interviewed you. You said I gotta look presentable. You know what I mean? These brothers had a plan. They look presentable. You can't help but to tell these brothers, yes, I want to do whatever y'all trying to do.
Yeah, that's very important. Your image is very important. So that's especially if you want to be taken serious. So
yeah. Let's continue. We only got a few more minutes. 2 more minutes. Yes. We almost at the half mark on this reaction, and then we'll do a part 2 and finish the other half.
Absolutely
exciting. We did pop the cork and the champagne, but what was cooler than that was when we went into our offices. That made it real.
oh my God, what does this really all mean?
That means that we had to deliver.
All right, let's end it right there, man.
Right there. Yep.
All right, brother. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. What you got coming up? Besides the Young Wavy magazine, what you got coming up?
So really just the Young Wavy magazine. Everything else is kind of still cooking and brewing, but you know, I have my own superhero universe that I will be expanding. You know, when I do expand the magazine, I will have an imprint within the magazine where I will be
Okay,
launching.
because when I'm looking at the magazine, I saw
Yes.
you just had one centralized story. I was thinking maybe it was going to be some other stories in there. So are you planning to do that? Put some more stories in there? What
Yes.
you plan? Because to me, first off, brother, let me give you your flowers, your salute. Because bro, that's dope that you dropping you dropping a magazine, bro. You know?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
thank you, and you know, this 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 entire documentary is very important because it inspired me. Milestone's story inspired me. Seeing not only what they did right, but also kind of also seeing the reflection of how 2.0 Milestone 2.0 kind of just fumbled and kind of just went down the drain. Also, kind of gave me some time to reflect and like how can we do Milestone today, but do it, uh, you know, better to where it has a bit more longevity. So
Yeah.
I grew up on superhero comics, so I will be dipping my toe into that, and I'll show you a little preview of what I
Okay.
got cooking up. I won't tell you much, but
Okay. Oh man, we
I
got some
will show
exclusive.
you.
Oh, bro, that's fire. Oh man, that's dope. That's the main character, right?
Yes, this is Genome, so this is just a sneak peek of what I got cooking up. This will be my way to show homage to the just not only the classic, you know, superheroes of Marvel that I grew up on, but also to share some and also pay homage to Static Shock. You know, the largest, I think the most innovative kind of when you talk about black superheroes, Static Shock you can't forget.
Yeah.
You know, and what they did with Milestone in general, you know,
Yeah.
but try to expand that. Um, and I think a big factor is getting into a point where you have a publisher that is you can actually grow in, right? So I don't think a DC was the right move in the long term, and it definitely isn't now. So
Yeah. Yeah. Man, you helped me so much, brother, because when I watch you on other people's channels, uh, you study the game. So I'm listening to you, and I'm soaking up the game as well because I'm thinking, okay, I need to stay away from that. I never thought about it like this. So, hey, brother, keep on doing your thing, brother, because you're gonna blow. You know, you're
and
gonna
you as
definitely
well,
blow.
because I'll definitely be reading your work as well once I get my hands on it. You
Yes,
know,
sir. Yes, sir.
I'll get my hands on it financially right now. I mean, I've still got a ways to go,
Hey,
but I will get my hands
hey,
on
put it like this. Robert Kirkman. We already know his story. He did, he was in debt,
it.
you
Yeah,
know, but he had the vision. I always hear you say that. You got the vision. As long as you
absolutely,
got the vision, you a millionaire. You know what I'm
absolutely,
saying? We're
absolutely.
gonna end it right there. I appreciate you coming. We're gonna do the part 2, maybe next weekend or something. You know, I appreciate you, Young Wavy. Y'all make sure to check out this magazine. And that's another installation of Indie Comic Secrets. Peace.